Hello, my name is Sophia Giraldo. I'm a mom, a boy mom, times 3. I know. I'm an entrepreneur, and I am a survivor of the trauma that comes with betrayal and domestic abuse. One thing that really helped me in my recovery process and my healing was realizing that who I am and the way that I am put together is a gift. And the reality is just because someone else doesn't recognize the value of that gift, that doesn't make the gift any less valuable. Just because someone else doesn't recognize the value of the gift of who you are, that doesn't make the gift, who you are, any less valuable.
"41-year-old Sophia Giraldo describes herself as a survivor of betrayal, trauma, and abuse, and hosts a podcast called Unfiltered and Free, in which she shared her struggles with her toxic marriage just days before the caught-on-video attack outside of her Flushing, New York home. Sophia also runs a life coaching business aimed at helping victims of domestic abuse. In her most recent podcast episode, she says, "I've just been thinking about my expectations and how as a result of trauma, I tend to expect the negative. I tend to expect the worst thing to happen, the worst case scenario, all those things. And I want my new year to look different." Footage obtained by The Post shows her husband, 36-year-old MTA bus driver Stephen Giraldo, behind the wheel of a white Ford Explorer, suddenly accelerating and smashing into the side of a home on Parsons Boulevard near Franklin Avenue around 5:20 a.m. The SUV can be seen on surveillance footage waiting outside of Sophia's home with the headlights on. Sophia can be seen exiting the home, with the SUV hitting the gas roughly a minute later and striking Sophia as her 3 children, who were inside of the SUV with her husband, watched in horror. The man whose yard the Ford Explorer ended up in says cops asked for his security footage. They're also canvassing the area for additional witnesses and evidence in the case. The SUV struck a fence in the front of the house and flipped on its side with the children, all boys, ages 11, 9, and 6. The kids were not physically injured in the crash. After the SUV flipped on its side, Stephen Giraldo then proceeded to crawl out of the wreckage and stab Sophia in the stomach. Sophia was rushed to New York Presbyterian Queens Hospital, where she remains in critical condition and is clinging on to life after suffering severe trauma to her body. Her 3 children were also taken to the hospital and were expected to be picked up by an acquaintance. Sophia discussed the troubled marriage in her podcast, which she launched on October 26 and has since recorded 9 episodes, the most recent on December 23rd. She described the podcast as a show where we have real and raw conversations about living life after betrayal and abuse. In a December 12th episode, she said she knew firsthand about navigating a life turned upside down by a toxic relationship. She also discussed her decision to end the marriage, saying, "When I talk about saying yes to the best, I'm really talking about looking at the good versus the best. This can show up in many different ways in your life. The main way that this showed up in my life was when I was trying to figure out whether or not I was going to leave my marriage. I spent a long time in the thick of a lot of emotional unrest, a lot of toxicity, a lot of abuse. It was almost as if my brain was saying, 'You got this, you got this, you got this.' And I did have it. I had 3 children, 3 boys, and I knew that it was never my intention for them to grow up in a single-parent home. That was never my intention. And so whenever I started thinking about the fact that, okay, this is really out of control, Sophia, something has got to shift, I always would think about my children and what was the best decision. Was this going to be the best decision for them? One of the things I thought was, am I willing to let my children grow up in toxicity just so I can say that there's a male in the home? For me, it did wind up that I left my marriage, and I actively trust that, God knows what's best for my children." Neighbors describe her as a loving mother who is extremely devoted to her kids. They also noted that the children seemed very happy. They were well behaved and that they never saw the husband around before hearing the news about the horrifying incident. The superintendent of the building where Sophia lives said she moved there with her children to escape her husband. Local residents said they were shocked at the commotion in the typically quiet Queens neighborhood. Police say they are investigating the incident as a domestic assault and that Giraldo attacked his wife over a domestic dispute. Stephen Giraldo was charged with attempted murder, assault, criminal possession of a weapon, reckless endangerment, and 3 counts of endangering the welfare of a child. In a statement, the MTA said Giraldo is suspended without pay, pending the completion of an investigation. The case remains ongoing.
Here behind me, you can see the scene at this very moment. The police actually pulled the vehicle involved in this crash away from the scene within the last few minutes. And what you see there is a police car and firefighters on the other side of it helping clean up what is left here on this scene. I have to tell you again, we have that surveillance video and it's hard to watch. Investigators tell us there is no doubt this was intentional.
I thought it was crazy. That's all I saw.
That car landed in Jeffrey Zhang's yard and mangled his wrought iron fence. Lots of people in this Flushing neighborhood are trying to make sense of all of this. Here's what we've learned so far. The couple has a history of domestic violence. EMS crews rushed their mom to New York Presbyterian Hospital. At last check, she's critical. This investigation had this area roped off all day.
The police just asked me for the surveillance.
Investigators are also working to learn more about the relationship between the husband and wife. Neighbors tell us that the husband doesn't live here, but the woman and her boys moved into the brick building on this block a few years ago. Back out here live, you can see the scene at this very moment. I checked in with police within the last 10 minutes before we came on air. Their official spokespeople tell us this. At this point, they have no information on charges to pass on, but they say all of that is pending. Here behind me, we see an officer cleaning up. They're about to clear out of this scene.